From a Catholic perspective, that's very important. It's very important because the Holy Spirit dwells in us. We have sanctifying grace. Grace is the indwelling of the Holy Spirit, which transforms our souls from the inside out. But when we sin, we lose that sanctifying grace. We cut ourselves off from the vine, the one vine, which is Jesus Christ. So we must be reattached in order to have that divine life dwelling in us. Then when we receive Holy Communion, we truly are receiving the spouse of our souls, the life-giving, the source of all life, the source of immortality, that medicine of immortality. All right, so, and I'll open this up for questions. So if that core of pro-life people is truly living an integral sacramental life, then there's not going to be anything that gets in the way of that grace indwelling in their souls pouring out on all those around them. And when you meet somebody holy, you know it. They are somebody you want to be around. You want to be around that person. You want to know what they have to say, and you want your friends to meet that person too, right? Yes. Well, of course, we're talking about Jesus Christ, but each of us is called to take Christ out in the world. And we can have that effect also. You know, it takes a real commitment. It takes some work, but it's God doing the work. We only participate in that work. All right. There's your catechism lesson for today. Now, as a church, you know, many in the Catholic Church have drifted away from the sacrament of confession, and this is important to our discussion today. After the Second Vatican Council, which was between 1962 and 1965, there were these new ideas about moral theology. Now, these didn't necessarily have anything to do with the Second Vatican Council. They had more to do with the 1960s. And this new concept of moral theology was that Jesus Christ spoke to his time period, things that were relevant to his time period. And then there were a group of moral theologians in the late 60s that wrote through the 80s. Some of them are still around today. And they said that, well, we need to look at that historically, that times have changed. And then we can look at Jesus' teachings and apply the principles to today. But those things that St. Paul said were sins, well, he was talking about that culture. But our culture's different now. And so this was used to excuse many things that the Holy Father, Pope John Paul II, came back definitively in 1993, and he wrote in a document called Veritatis Splendor that these things cannot be explained away by the circumstances. There are certain things that are intrinsically evil. So, for instance, pornography, the use of the gift of sexuality outside of marriage, the sin of Onan, the book of Genesis. I won't specify what that is. Sins against the flesh are often so invasive to our souls, that not only do they hurt our souls, but they even hurt our minds. They darken our minds. They are sources of anxiety, abortion, birth control. These are some of the things that these moral theologians tried to explain away and excuse. And they said, well, the circumstance might excuse these. But what they didn't realize is by giving people the permission to do these things, oh my gosh, people fell into these dark holes of sin and despair They left their faith, they left the church, and they went looking for truth elsewhere. We need to acknowledge that sin hurts us. Now, when I'm talking about sin and sinners, I'm not pointing the finger at anybody because we're all sinners. But sin hurts us. And if somebody gives you permission to sin, and you walk into it thinking, oh, I can do this because of the circumstances make it okay, well, you're still hurt. And you don't even know it because you think you were supposed to do this. And you don't understand why you're hurting so much and why you no longer believe in God. So it's very important to reclaim our moral heritage and to seek reconciliation with God with a humble and contrite heart. And then we can be holy and happy and seek healness, or seek healing. And this is philosophical as well as theological. So this is another aspect of that formation that's very important in a parish, is to educate the people on philosophy as well as theology. Okay, now, I know philosophy raises red flags for people. And Christians in general today have a negative attitude toward philosophy. Well, and it's understandable. You know, if your college-age child goes off to University of Oregon or OSU or any number of places to go study philosophy, they're going to leave their faith. They're going to leave their faith. All right. So it's very important, though, to understand why. What is happening in philosophy? We need to reclaim a Christian Catholic philosophy that defends the faith, that builds on the formation of the wisdom literature of the Holy Scriptures, which was philosophy. Seeking of wisdom, love of wisdom, that's what philosophy means. Sophia, philosophia, Sophia is holy wisdom. We need to understand philosophy as seeking of truth and God's holy wisdom to counter bad philosophy, to counter atheistic philosophy. Many people who disagree with the teachings of the church disagree on philosophical terms, not necessarily on theological ones. So in a sense, I guess what I'm saying is we need to rebuild a culture that is amenable to divine revelation, to the divine and eternal law, to the moral law, to a law that builds up and supports a culture of life. We kind of have to start and look to see where that foundation has been eroded away and work on the foundation and build on that, a core group that's going to be leaven for the parish. And I think I'm out of time, so...